Welcome to Voices in Health and Wellness. This is the podcast where we bring together forward-thinking practitioners who are redefining healthcare through root cause, holistic and patient-empowering approaches. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Greenland. I'm a medical UK doctor working in functional medicine, focused at root cause analysis for complex conditions. And this podcast is about creating a space where health professionals can share what they're building, why they're building it, and how we can collectively move healthcare forward. Today, I'm joined by Jono Goosen. Jono is a London-based back pain and movement specialist and founder of Jono Goosen Limited. His mission is simple but powerful: help people move better, feel better, and live the life they want to, pain-free. Jono, with that, I'd like to welcome you to the show and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here.
Perfect. So maybe we could start at the top. Could you perhaps talk a little bit about your journey and how you've ended up doing what you do? Obviously, you've had quite a geographical journey as well, both professionally as well. Can you take us back to Zimbabwe and walk us through how you ended up building your practice in the UK?
Okay, so it is a bit of a long journey. It all started when I was a young boy. My mom used to make me massage her back because she was in the health and fitness sector. She was a personal trainer, and then she started owning gyms. So at about the age of 14, I was always pulled into the gym to help people use the machines and all of that. So the human body and human health has been a great interest of mine since a young age. And then progressing through school, it came time to leave school and what I was thinking of doing. And then the Sharks Rugby Academy came up, and then I went down to Durban and I played rugby for a bit. I studied sports science there for 2 years. And then, my rugby career took off for a little bit, played semi-professionally. And then I ended up moving back to Zimbabwe from Durban, and I went back into the gyms, and I was helping a lady expand her facility and working with clients and all of that. And then I got a bit bored of kind of working in that environment. It kind of got to the point where I just felt that people were paying me to count for them. And I knew that there was something missing, and I could help people a bit more with their bodies and their health, but I just didn't know what. So I decided to take a complete pivot and went and bred chickens for a couple of years in the middle of nowhere in Zimbabwe and Masvingo. And I quite enjoyed my experience in there and working with the birds. And, we're producing 140,000 day-old chicks a week. So I really had to monitor the environment that these hens were in. And that's where I really started to understand the impact of the environment on our production, really, because if the hen wasn't happy, it wouldn't give you an egg. And cut a few years, go fast track a few years from there. I then went back to Harare, and then I was looking for the next thing to do because I wanted to go back into working with people again. And then this process came up called Myoreformation, and it was developed by Jackie Simpson. Well, she's the founder of it in Harare, and her life's journey is it's a different topic, a different question, I think. And so I went again. It was my mother Jane who then told me to go and look into this, and I was like, it sounds like a massage to me. And she says it's the furthest thing from a massage. Just go and speak with Jackie and see where it goes. So I went and I sat down with Jackie, and then the first question she asked me was, why do you want to be a practitioner? I said, well, because I want to help people in a more meaningful way. And she said, okay, that's great. So she said, well, first of all, you have to come and have the process. And when I went and lay on her treatment bed and she gave me my first session, I remember it was really something. I was like, wow, okay, this is quite intense, but it felt amazing. And I then finished the course of treatment with her, and then I joined her. I went on her second course, and everything just started making sense, working in the body the way that the process works with it. I could see with my understanding of the anatomy and physiology, I could see what I was trying to do and what the body was meant to do, and that's to heal and restore through improved blood and lymphatic flow. And so qualified in 2018, and then I started thinking of how best to go about this. And what's funny is that I gave a treatment to a person who then launched me in a new area. So I went from Harare. I was treating in Victoria Falls, and then I treated a lady in Harare who lived in Zambia. So she took me up to Zambia. I was working in the copper belt for a while, and then I gave a lady a treatment in Harare who was from the Isle of Wight. And then she said, Johnno, there's nothing like this in the UK. And if you're interested, she would host me in the Isle of Wight and see where it goes. And that was in July 2019. And at the same time, we were also coming on a holiday to visit my wife's grandmother and her father. So we just tied it all together. And then I was also speaking to a tetraplegic in London who heard about me from somebody in South Africa. So it's, the stars were kind of aligning. And then we came over here in July 2019. And then we just got things kicked off. And then people were actually following me around the country because I gave a treatment to a lady who was from Yorkshire. And she said, would you like to come up to Yorkshire? So I kind of went up to there as well. And then my grandmother-in-law lives in Shropshire. And then I was working in London. And then so that's how the whole UK came across it. And then when I came back into the UK in January 2020, scheduled to go back in March 2020. And then, of course, COVID came along and everything went into lockdown and we couldn't go back. And then that's when I spoke to my wife and said, the opportunity is here for me to apply for my ancestral visa. And that's going to take a 7-year process to get my British citizenship. So that's how it all came about, being in the UK. And I've settled in London because I think that's where everybody needs to come to London. I found for some reason. So so that's where I am today, 5 years into it.
Lovely. Well, thank you for that, sharing that journey. It's always inspiring and interesting to hear how people get from the beginning to where they are. So for those that don't know much about myoreformation, and that includes me to some extent, can you give us a kind of an idea of exactly what it looks like from a patient perspective? What can they expect? What does it do perhaps differently from other modalities?
So myoreformation, it's a full body treatment designed to separate muscles and ligaments and open up joints. And that way we are promoting the blood and the lymphatic flow. And the way we move through the body is we're working perpendicular to the muscles attachment. So the easiest way I could explain it is our bodies work vertically. And what the process does is it takes the body horizontally. So we're stretching each muscle from its attachments and then letting it go. And then the body's going to try and recalibrate to that. And through that, the separation of the muscles, we're also lengthening the muscles and allowing them to return back to their resting position. So inevitably, we are resetting the fascia and triggering the muscle memory, because that's what's doing the healing at the end of the day. So it's, I think that's the best way I can describe it.
Thank you. I mean, what's the closest it comes to? Because there's obviously lots of different manual therapies out there. Is it a blend of other things, or is it very similar to something else that people might have a handle on?
Yeah, so it was stemmed from Bowen, which was developed by Dr. Bowen. And because if we go to Jackie's story, because this is her process, this is her life's journey into healing herself from being declared a quadriplegic at the age of 19. So if I go into the founder's story, I'll just give you a brief of that, and then that will give you an idea of how the process came about. So when after her accident and being declared a quadriplegic, she started spending every waking moment trying to get her signals back to her fingers and her toes. And then 8 weeks later, she managed to sign herself out of hospital. And then from there, she went into the rehab and the physiotherapy work. And then they managed to get her walking again, but it was always assisted walking. And she was always in constant pain. And then they turned to her and said, this is all you're going to get. So you might as well start making provisions to make your life a bit more comfortable. And she said, well, first of all, you said I wouldn't walk. Now I'm walking. Now you're saying this is all I'm going to get. So she said, well, thank you. And then she went into the alternative side and found Bowen. And Bowen gave her some relief. And then she managed to learn it. Well, she studied it. And then she was practicing on family and friends. And then she came across vascular muscular harmonization technique, VHT, which is all about stimulating the nervous system, because the philosophy is once the body's gone through something traumatic, like an accident or anything like that, the nervous system will contract itself. And if we don't do anything to retract that, then the body is going to stay in high alert, and you're preventing the blood and lymphatic flow from doing its primary role, which is to feed the body. So she managed to learn that again, and then she figured out that both, Bowen wasn't challenging enough and VHT was a bit too challenging, so she went somewhere in the middle, and then she incorporated the lymphatic stimulation into it. So the process it's a bit of everything in one. Is how I like to tell people. It's like you can go to lymphatic drainage, you can go to rolfing or massage, or you can go to VHT, or you can go to whatever else, or reflexology or anything, or you come into Myoreformation and you can get all of those modalities in one.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about your practice as it stands now, and what kind of patients tend to seek you out? In fact, how do they even find you? Because I suspect they may not necessarily be searching for the name of the therapy, but they clearly get to you somehow. So tell us a bit about that.
So I mainly, radio HP has been my first port of call for just putting myself out there in terms of, and then it's mainly been word of mouth and referrals. That's how I've been managing to build my clients. And I've been focusing on my adverts at Radio HP has primarily been on back pain, because it's probably the most common thing that's affecting people in this day and age. Is everyone's suffering from some back pain in some form or another, especially being at desk all the time. So that's how I attract people in, and then once they've felt the process working for them, there's always somebody that they can think of that would benefit from it. So that's kind of how it's been working for me.
Yeah. And tell us maybe a little bit like a typical patient journey. Now, I appreciate every condition, and even within back pain, there's a whole array of different presentations. But what might a journey look like for a patient with back pain in terms of their initial contact with you, working through the treatment plan? What does it look like?
So I always recommend starting the process with 3 treatments within a 2-week period. Just when we start, to give the body a really good start to the process, because when we open the channels, the body is going to try and go back to what it knows, because that's the most efficient way of operating. And I spoke earlier about triggering the muscle memory, because that's what's doing the healing. So the 3 sessions over a 2-week period allows us to trigger the muscle memory and also monitor how the body is responding to the process, because we are taking the body out of its comfort zone. We're going into the threshold, because that's where the work needs to be done, but obviously at the body's pace. And then the second session, we can go and the body will be a bit more trusting to the process. And then the third session really just sets in that memory. And then we can then determine how chronic the body is in, what frequency we need to work at, whether we come in every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or every month. It just depends on how chronic the body is and the response to the process.
So in the world of back pain, what are the biggest misconceptions that people have about back pain in your from your perspective?
It's something that they have to live with or manage, or it's, and I know everything it's part of it, but they kind of say that they have a weak core. Yeah, they may have a weak core, but what I found is that when you're putting load on top of load, you're just kicking the can down the road. So you're not really getting to the cause of the problem. And like I said, when you're sitting at it, it's depending on your your lifestyle and where you are, what your body's doing for majority of your day. So when you try and straighten up, that's when the pain starts setting in, because your body's so used to being in a certain position. And once we remove the tension, you're allowing the vertebrae to then free up a little bit and move naturally within the body. So it's not about strengthening or putting load, because the back's already loaded, which is why you're getting the pain and inflammation in the first place.
And so for patients who've had back pain for many, many, many years and have got that mindset that it's something they have to put up with, how do you get them to reconnect with trust in their body? Obviously, you do the hands-on work, but what about the kind of the psychological side of this?
That's part of the parcel with the process as well, because the mind has to take part in the treatment. It's not me just treating your body. The mind has to be actively involved in diffusing that natural fight or flight response that the body's going to go through with the movement associated with the treatment. So which will then calm the mind down, because we are challenging, waiting for the mind to calm the body down, and then we move through the muscle structure. So it's kind of, it all ties into one process.
Thank you. And so zooming out a little bit from your niche and your speciality, what shifts are you seeing in the wider movement and rehab space at the moment?
I think people are starting to ask better questions. I think they're starting to take better care of themselves, but it's very slow, and they know that, well, they want to. It's all about preventative care now, and people are starting to acknowledge that the more they stay mobile, the longer they will be mobile, instead of just sitting in one place and just paying, and just when something goes wrong with the body, that's when they pay themselves attention. But people are coming to me, they're like, I'm starting to feel tension, and then I say, well, that's a good time to come in, because we are addressing it early rather than waiting 5, 10, 15 years before something chronic pops up, and then you then have to go through the more drastic measures. So I think preventative care is becoming more prevalent right now at the moment, which is nice to see.
And do you think we're moving towards more empowerment or more dependency? Obviously outside of your setting, because I appreciate that you have a slightly different approach, but just more generally.
It's a difficult one to say, because there's I think they're quite evenly distributed at the moment. It's I think it comes down to creating more awareness for people out there, which is why I was very attracted to your podcast. Is there's so many different things to do that you don't need to become dependent on one thing. You can empower yourself to live a life that you want to live if you choose. I think people become restricted in what they know, and that's when they become dependent, I think. So it's kind of a mixed bag, really.
Well, I guess you have a lot of people coming to you from conventional medicine. Where do you think the shortfalls still are in conventional medicine as the way they approach musculoskeletal problems and back pain more specifically?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, because it's something that's a very hot topic at the moment, isn't it? For me, following the science is very important. It's research is coming out, and it's starting to enlighten us on new studies on how the body actually moves and corrects itself. And what I've found is that medicine is still basing its approach on old science. I know that it is starting to shift, but majority of my patients that have come to me have gone through the usual routine of steroid injections, and then if that doesn't work, which the first one works well, then the body builds a tolerance, and to the second one, then the third one hardly touches sides, because the body is it's adapting to that process. And then the next port of call is going into spinal fusion or surgery or anything like that, instead of addressing the soft tissue. And then, but obviously they've sent them to physiotherapy and rehab and all of that, which is then adding load onto an already stressed area. So if we go back to the science and we look at kinesiology, that gives us a great picture of where musculoskeletal treatment needs to be, and where the awareness needs to come in as well.
So there's, I guess there's still a gap between movement professionals, inverted commas, and medical professionals. Is that getting any smaller from what you're saying, or are we just in status quo?
I think, like I said earlier, is that people are starting to ask better questions, and they're starting to look for the alternative routes. I'm not taking anything away from anything here, because everything has a place in the grand scheme of things. It just depends how we can incorporate it all into one banner, really, to give the patient the best form of care. And I spoke at the sepsis patient conference 2 weeks ago, talking about this exact gap between being medically stable and physically confident, and where my work will fit in is in that gap, where the MRI scans and the X-rays say that there's nothing wrong with the person, but the person is still feeling the pain and discomfort, and there's nothing really to direct that person to an answer that they seek. So that's where Myoreformation will sit in, just to help bridge that gap, making the patient's life a bit more easier to get through, I guess.
Thank you. So I'd like to move a little bit around to the business side, because I know many of our listeners will be building their own practices, and just curious to know what's working really well for you from a business point of view at the moment in your practice.
What's really it's kind of hard, it's you've got to be at it all the time, and I think it's the creating the awareness part of it, which is working well. Every client that comes in, it's about helping them understand what we're doing, and then creating the referrals, and then obviously working on the back end and just keeping people informed, and just making I think it's making my patients feel heard and understood, really, and letting them know that I can sympathize with where they are and work with them to get them to where they want to be. I think that's the main, just making them feel heard, I guess.
And on the other side of the coin, what are some of the challenges of doing the work that you do and extending your reach, and the general business challenges, or maybe things you've perhaps had to overcome along the journey?
It's definitely people, going down the conventional route, and I'm always, complementary alternative therapy is always the last resort once they don't get the answers that they need from the medical world. So I guess that is one of the challenges that I face, is people coming in with the mindset that that they've already been told that nothing is wrong with them and nothing's going to fix them, and then it's just changing that mindset and working with once we start working with people and we start getting to the deep-seated tension and we start releasing that, then the body is going to shift, and then there is sometimes there is a regression before there's progression. Because we're taking the body back through what it's been coping with, and then that can get really, really scary for people, because now they've something's been triggered. So then they then want to go back to the conventional route, because now they think something has happened to them, rather than this is you're going through a healing crisis. It's part of the process. We just need to allow the body, just trust that the body knows what it's doing, and at the end of the day, everything that you do relies on the body's own ability to heal itself. So we just need to do something that just enhances that own ability.
So as a business owner, we often wear all of the hats, or at least many hats. Which of those hats is the biggest time drain for you in the business?
Definitely marketing and lead generation, and putting that out, because I'm in my practice 4 days a week, and I've only given myself 1 day to do the administration. But I found that if you only do administration on 1 day, you're too slow to keep up with this, with the world of technology at the moment. People want answers now, and if you're not there to do that, then you could leave business on the table. So definitely, it would definitely be marketing and just keeping yourself in the public eye, because when what they say, out of sight, out of mind.
Indeed. And if your practice suddenly doubled its new client inquiries in the next month, what would happen? Hopefully nothing would break, and hopefully not you. But what would happen?
Well, sure, I would be a very happy man, I'll tell you that, Andrew. And luckily, I've got my wife on the other end to help me with the booking inquiries and with the administration and that type of stuff. So, nothing will break. It's just a matter of how to service those people as efficiently as I can, I guess. I welcome that new dilemma.
I'm going to give you a magic wand. I'm going to empower you with a magic wand. If you could fix one thing in the business tomorrow, what would that be?
It would be lead generation.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
If you've had a long journey, you've obviously come on quite an interesting route with experiences and influences. But if you were to build everything again from scratch tomorrow, would you do anything differently?
Sure. I haven't thought about that. Would I do anything differently? I probably. I don't think I would. I think everything happened to kind of get me to where I am today. I think I needed to go through that process to gain the experience. So, if I had the experience that I would have today, I probably would just instead of driving all over the country, I'd just get on, a podcast like I'm with you today, Andrew, and then start talking about it, and then just creating awareness that way, rather than thinking I have to lug myself all over the place, I guess. I think I'd be a bit more efficient in terms of gaining awareness. I think that's the main thing. Yeah, but other than that, I really love my journey. I've been luckier than most, being able to work in different locations all over the place. I think I've seen more of England than most people have their entire life. So. I think this journey has been my journey, and I am where I am because of it. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to change anything. So,
nice, thank you. And as you look ahead, what's the next evolution of your work look like?
The next evolution would be to establish a training school and start teaching people about the process, get more practitioners out there, because I'm getting inquiries from all over the country, and I think that's the next step for me. And I've already started advertising it in the FHT magazine, the Federation of Holistic Therapists, which is my governing body, and I'm getting a few inquiries from there. But it would be to find a suitable location and start teaching people, and just build a team of practitioners to help the public, I guess.
Are there many of you out there at the moment?
So, in the UK, there are 3 of us practicing. There's 2 in London, and 2 of us in London, and then there's 1 in Stroud. And there's 1 practitioner who's just opened up in Australia, and the rest are based in Zimbabwe. I think there's about 25 people in Zimbabwe at the moment. So yeah, it's an ever evolving discipline. Like I said, it's stemmed from other practices, but it brings in everything. It stimulates every single system in the body at the same time, which is what the body needs in order to kickstart its own natural abilities.
So plenty of scope to expand in the UK based on those numbers then.
Yeah, plenty of scope, yes.
Wonderful. Well, with that, Jono, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a really interesting conversation, hearing about your journey, your practice, a little bit about the modality that you're practicing and how you're helping people. I wish you all the best, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I really appreciate being on the show, and thank you.